A really interesting chat right now. Obviously, many businesses within Liverpool City region, really struggling, feeling the impact of the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic and the ongoing lockdown. No one quite knows where we stand, where we are. Liverpool Chamber of Commerce do some fantastic work. I'm sure you've heard of them. If not, we got Paul Cherpeau on to tell us, first off, what is Liverpool Chamber, Paul?
Hi Jay. So the Chamber of Commerce has existed in Liverpool for 170 years, and since 1850, it was created with the objective to represent the commercial interests of businesses in Liverpool, and we continue to deliver upon that mantra even today, and particularly during this pandemic, it's become particularly important that we are as supportive to businesses in the city as we possibly can be. At our core, we are a trade association, so businesses effectively pay to be a member of the chamber, and for that they become part of a collective of organisations seeking to support one another, and also benefit from the sort of collective services that we can provide. We act as the voice of those organisations on a multitude of issues, locally, nationally and internationally. We deliver support for businesses through signposting to funding opportunities. We deliver some content ourselves around international trade, around business improvement, growth and development. And we do our absolute utmost to support businesses across multiple sectors to find their way through difficult times, but also times of opportunity. So we're there really as a bit of a one-stop shop to provide a multitude of services, products, and also, I think most crucially to the purpose that the Chamber was set up, a collective voice to act on their behalf.
You've obviously been right at the forefront of the kind of pandemic in terms of what businesses have been going through this year. What's it been like? And it must be quite hard for you to see some of these businesses struggling, because Liverpool was in a really good place coming into 2020, wasn't it? So it's been a roller coaster. That word's used a lot for many businesses in the city.
Yeah, it really has, and because we're part of a national association, the British Chambers of Commerce, we get some really interesting and useful insights about what is happening across the country. And because we're a cross-sectoral trade association, you get a real understanding and appreciation of what certain types of businesses are going through. So at the moment and throughout this period in time, we've almost been guilty of articulating this broad brush approach that everything is shut down, everything's calamitously bad for organisations. Now, it's absolutely true that for a lot of businesses in Liverpool and in the UK, it's been an unprecedentedly challenging period of time for them. And we've spoken, you and I have spoken on webinars and such about the specific challenges facing the likes of the visitor economy. But we also have to acknowledge that the amount of business continuity that's taken place in construction, in manufacturing, in public services as well, of course, has really been outstanding across the patch. And we've seen a huge amount of adaptations from organisations to the prevailing circumstances. I think the big challenge for businesses really is the uncertainty that has been produced not only by the pandemic itself, but also the reaction to the pandemic, whether that be from government or otherwise. And I think what we've experienced through this particular time when we've been speaking to businesses and speaking to other members of our national association is that this kind of uncertainty is what really undermines businesses at this particular time. Cash is absolutely king at any time in a business life cycle, but now more than ever, whilst so many organisations are struggling to generate revenue, to maybe limit costs, they need as much planning as possible. You've also got some issues around, obviously, Brexit is taking place, so there's a huge proportion of businesses that are directly impacted by that, because They're dependent upon the trade links with the European Union, and that's going to be a huge shift as well that they have been trying to prepare for and will have to try and prepare for even more. So in this context, I don't think there's ever been a more challenging time to be running a business or to be part of a business, and trying to navigate this period of time has been incredibly difficult for so many.
It's funny, you mentioned the word kind of evolve there, and so many businesses have done that within Liverpool City region so well from all sectors. Some great examples just in hospitality, for instance, those who've opened delivery services. I was doing a gig last night at MSP Studios, and they've created a TV studio so they continue doing their events. You look at like Aintree Gin, who distill gin and went into hand sanitizer products. So many businesses have done well out of this, and that creativity has been key in Liverpool City region, hasn't it?
Yeah, it really has. And we're one of our events coming up at the end of this month, we're going to be using the MSP studio as well. We've seen that sort of adaptation, even down to legal professional service firms, quickly adapting to the situation by making sure that they can operate from home. It sounds relatively easy on paper, but for organisations of that size, with the complexities involved, it's been a mammoth task for them to adapt to the prevailing circumstances. So huge amounts of adaptation has taken place, and it really shouldn't be underestimated. What will be particularly interesting now as we come into 2021, and hopefully we can see some light at the end of the tunnel with potential vaccine and such. How much will the changes that have been enacted by the pandemic actually result in sustainable change? How will organisations adapt positively out of this, and will some of the things that maybe 12 months ago were deemed, if not impossible, then improbable, will they actually become part of how we do business more normally? Some things, such as this interview by Zoom, for example, it's great in certain circumstances, but I think the ability for teams in organisations to interact, to problem solve, it needs that physical interaction, doesn't it? So I think it's those kind of dynamics that are going to be really interesting at organisational level, to see to what extent is business as usual going to be just simply a reversion back to January, February 2020, or will the dreaded phrase of the new normal, what will that actually look like for organisations? And there's always a catalyst for change, isn't there? Whether it's war, famine, and here we are, a pandemic, and look at the shift it's caused in terms of our behaviours. And that's where I think the dynamics will be particularly important, and those that can adapt best to the circumstances as we come out of this are probably as important as those who adapted going into the pandemic, and that ultimately will derive competitive advantage in a lot of sectors.
Well, one big thing, obviously, from 2020 is working from home. And mixed opinions and views on this. I do get more done at home. I start my day earlier, finish later, naturally, because you're in the house. But a lot of people do struggle with it. I'm all for getting back into the city centre and getting that buzz of being in town and being with your colleagues as well. What are your thoughts on it? And what are the thoughts across the business community in Liverpool about working from home?
I think it's difficult to be able to articulate a single view on this, because a lot of the opinions on working from home versus not working from home are ultimately down to personal circumstances. As someone with like two kids, aged 6 and 2, working from home was not particularly conducive to productivity. And I know a lot of individuals and organisations have struggled with that. There's still work to be done, but it's about the environment within which you can do that work. I think we touched upon it earlier about the importance of cohesion in a team and the dynamics in an office or in a collective working environment. And I think there's still going to be a massive demand for that. I'm particularly conscious as well of like younger people coming into employment potentially for the first time, and the importance in a non-institutionalized place. So you're coming out of school, university, college, where it's a relatively controlled environment, and all of a sudden you're thrown into what is effectively a strange world that is completely alien to you. That's where you often develop, some really important relationships in your life, in your working, professional and personal capacities. And, a lot of that, if we were to revert to sort of a working from home culture, could potentially be lost. And I think that's a crying shame. So I think that's a very long-winded way of saying I'm pretty much on the fence.
Yeah.
When it comes to this, I think undoubtedly there will be an adaptation from organisations to adopt hybrid methods of working. There will undoubtedly be certain sectors of industry that simply can't enable working from home, and that has to be accepted as well. But I think where it can work, it's demonstrated to those who are perhaps reluctant to implement flexible working arrangements that actually it can work, and it can act as a really important a benefit for your company to attract talent, to retain talent, if you can offer that to your employees. I think I think this is just part of the dynamic that's going to change over the course of the years to come. And of course, we made reference earlier to what impact does that have on city centres. The city centre economy is largely dependent upon footfall and consumer spend. Now, if you're diminishing that footfall and potential spend, then inevitably your city centre might struggle. And I think the dynamics that the pandemic has unleashed in this are posing a particular challenge to city centres and their attractiveness for as places to live and work. So there's undoubtedly going to be a lot of shift in like the commercial property market. There's already adaptations taking place, which were happening anyway in terms of the requirements of organisations, and those questions are just going to be ever more considered by organisations who are either looking at taking space or providing space as part of their service. Huge potential shifts in how that entire market will operate, and the implications for cities is massive.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens in that respect. And it is right, though, we are missing that kind of buzz of walking around town and going out on your lunch break, maybe bumping into someone and just feeling the Liverpool city centre and what it has to offer. And just stuff like going for a drink after work with your workmates. I think people are missing the kind of social elements and aspects of it too, aren't they?
Massively, yeah. And again, it's part of that. It's part of the entire social structure that we have, and it's part of what makes Liverpool what it is as well. We've built up over the last 15 years. Our economic renaissance has been so strongly based upon culture, visitor economy, the lifestyle choices that comes with life in Liverpool. And a lot of that, quite frankly, is not happening at the moment. Now it will come back, and it'll come back with an absolute vengeance, and it's going to be fantastic. But in the interim period, that it's almost that which is one of the biggest psychological and economic challenges that we face, because we've become famous for it. Be over and above the Beatles and football, which was our main narrative for 20 years. It's expanding beyond that. People want to come to Liverpool for domestic breaks. They want to come to Liverpool because it's actually a really cool, exciting place to come to. And that's something that at the moment, it's difficult to really take advantage of. And that's what we need to look ahead to and think, okay, when this does come back, we've got to make the absolute best of it. We've got to maximize it. We've got to go hard with targeting domestic tourism, and we've got to make sure that 2021 becomes the opportunity for Liverpool to re-establish itself as the most exciting city in the UK to visit. But also we've got to use the opportunity then to look at, okay, how do we make sure that we're not as dependent upon it as we have been in the past? It's been, I think, the mayors talked about, culture being a rocket fuel for economic growth. It's entirely correct, but you then need to diversify your economy, and you've got to build new and exciting opportunities to develop talent from our schools and our universities and our colleges here, but also to attract them here as well. And that's where some of the developments, like in health and life sciences up at Paddington Village, the Knowledge Quarter, these also become things that are as important, if not more important, than our visitor economy over the next 5 years. And that's where we as a city start to become famous for even more things that can compete on the domestic market, the international market, and we become famous for real knowledge, expertise in other things as well. And that's where you start to get the effect where, kids coming into school, my lad's in year 2 now, but kids starting school know that almost like 14 years later, or whenever they finish their school education, then actually they've got some jobs and some opportunities that they feel able to pursue in Liverpool. And the onus is on us collectively to make some of that happen. So, we don't lose our talent to other cities in, the next 5, 10, 15 years, but we're not entirely dependent on our visitor economy just to keep going and just assuming that that'll be enough for us. It won't be, if we're going to realise the potential of our city region. So the onus is on all of us to make sure that we have, we commit to making sure that our people are the best trained people that we can possibly invest in the country, that we've got one of the best inward investment opportunities here in the city, that we're developing some of the most exciting developments in the country. And this is the narrative that has got to take precedence over kind of the slightly more backward looking, slightly stereotypical views that you get articulated over and over again in like national media or national consciousness. We've got some bloody good things here in Liverpool that have been built up over many, many years. Like yourself, Jay, I was born and have lived in Liverpool and worked in Liverpool all my life. So, we have that affinity and that determination to make things happen. And collectively, if we can harness that and really think about where we want to take our city, looking at the very serious and deep problems we have around wealth inequality, employment outcomes, skills outcomes, health outcomes, we've got to be absolutely committed and determined that we tackle these issues, because that way we can genuinely compete, not just in the Northwest, but actually we can compete on a national and global scale with an asset base comprising some of the best businesses that we can attract and develop in the city, with the best people that we can develop and attract to the city as well. And that's a winning combination.
You know what, really positive stuff there, Paul. It's about, as you said before, adaptation. The whole city has got to come together and evolve and adapt to get through this, hasn't it? Paul, I just want to talk about some of the stuff that you've got on the Chamber website. You mentioned earlier, off camera with me, you've got a finance finder, which sounds really interesting and a great help for a lot of businesses. Let's talk funding and furlough and what finance is available now. For anyone watching that is a little bit stuck, what advice would you give them?
So my advice to organisations looking for funding is to absolutely maximise some capacity to do your research and find the sources that are available to you. Contact the Chamber, contact the Growth Platform and the Liverpool Growth Hub. Contact whichever bank you're working with. All of these organisations will help you to find solutions to your problems, particularly when it comes to funding. There's a number, and it's almost overwhelming, to be perfectly honest, the amount of support available out there, but also some of the gaps in funding as well. There's loan, there's equity, there's some specific grant monies available, but again, you almost need to sit down with someone and be guided through it. The Chamber Finance Finder is something that is in place with the British Chambers of Commerce, and you can access it through the Chamber website. And it's a way of finding out the sources of finance that are available across the country. So it's not just about the local sources of finance. It's about loan, equity, debt finance that is available. So that's a tool that's available for Liverpool Chamber members. But similarly, there's those organisations I mentioned earlier, including the Growth Platform, including the Growth Hub network, who can signpost organisations who need specific support. And I think that's most likely the best option available. The other opportunity is through the MSIF Finance Hub as well. And if you do some searching for that, you will find that online. And again, it's being able to sit down virtually for the most part with individuals who can help find and broker some solutions for you. It's really, really complex because of the way that the government has made its decisions. Sometimes it feels on the fly to enable funding to be available. I think it would be remiss of me not to make comment about some of the sterling efforts, particularly from the local authority here in Liverpool, who have absolutely gone to the nth degree to take the government guidance and the government funding and translate that really quickly into some funding streams that were quickly accessible by businesses, and they turn that round unbelievably quickly, both in the summer and also through this iteration now. So it's been really impressive. The funds out there including things like the leisure and tourism, leisure and hospitality gap funding. There's a discretionary grant, and all of that is there. Some of it's really detailed to go through, so I won't go through the individual criteria on this particular call. But they're the kind of things that organisations need to be looking at where they've got particular challenges. And we understand. Look, let's face it, it's not nearly enough what's available at the moment. Our particular concern is furlough. The extension of furlough is absolutely the correct thing to do, and we as a collective group of chambers of commerce, along with other business associations and groups, have been calling for that for quite some time. And the frustration from our end is that was only agreed virtually at the last minute. So a lot of individuals have been made redundant. A lot of organisations have made plans on the basis of a set of circumstances that were suddenly changed almost overnight. Similarly, the job retention bonus, which was saying about £1,000 for every retained job, that was going to be paid at the end of January. That's been suspended because furlough has been brought back. Furlough is great, but actually, if you forecast in the next sort of 3, 4, 5 months because you've kept 30 jobs, then that's 30 grand that you're now not going to get in January, which is really, really difficult to take. And it's almost these unintended consequences because of the way that decisions are being made. The knock-on effect ultimately is into the cash flow of our businesses. So there's some real complexity in all of these decisions that are being made, and unfortunately it ultimately becomes about the impact upon businesses who are trying to trade their way through it. And we know that people are losing their jobs. We know businesses are going bust. We also know, of course, as I said earlier, that many businesses are trading through it, but on occasion it feels a little bit like some are managing to get through in spite of the support rather than because of it. That being said, look, there's been an incredible approach in terms of the amount of support that has been provided to businesses over this particular period of time. We have to acknowledge that, but there are some substantial gaps. The gaps for company directors of limited companies is an ongoing problem. Yeah. And one that we keep reinforcing as being, it needs some semblance of an intervention at some point. My worry is that it won't be, because I think there's been multiple opportunities for it to be sorted, and for whatever reason it hasn't been. Now we'll keep banging the drum on that, of course we will, but we have to acknowledge that if not in the preceding 7 or 8 months of this, why now? But we will keep the pressure up on that. The sort of cash flow support schemes that government have announced around £3,000 a month. Well, with the best will in the world, that's barely going to touch the sides of most organisations who've still got rent, rates to pay, all the other fixed overhead costs that they incur. So again, how do you actually mitigate against that? The other point as well, which needs consideration, is around testing. And we're absolutely delighted that Liverpool is pioneering this fight back against coronavirus. Mass testing, in my view, is the intermediary way to get out of this until such time as a vaccine becomes available. But even in that, you think about the disruption to businesses of employees being taken off assembly lines, being taken off their jobs, and again, that causes an issue for businesses. For the greater good, it's of course a good thing, and we want all businesses to embrace mass testing for their employees. But there also has to be an acknowledgement that it causes disruption to businesses as well, which I don't know if it can be solved by some sort of financial measure. But again, it just adds to this plethora of challenges that come through. Now, it's our job again collectively as organisations to find a way to support businesses through that. And as I say, it's not looking at it as being universally negative, and I think we've got some really good, exciting prospects when we come to recovery. But getting through this particular period of time is hugely challenging for businesses. But I think the overall message is, look, we're here collectively to support, to serve, and to make our contribution to ensure that all businesses can maximise their chances of surviving, but also being in a position to prosper coming out of this as well.
Okay. Will Liverpool survive this, Paul? Will we
yes.
get through as a city?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, we will. There is no doubt that the short-term impact of this economically, psychologically, is really, really difficult. And, we talked about it on the webinar we were both on a couple of weeks ago. But my view of Liverpool as things stand is that if we can preserve the economic base we've got at the moment, and I genuinely think we will, then we will be in a good position to kick on from that in 2021 for the reasons that I've talked about earlier. We do have an economic recovery plan. We've got some impetus behind what we know we're good at. We'll come back, we'll come roaring back next year, quite frankly. The developments up at Paddington Village is a demonstration of the art of the possible. We have an absolute specialism in health and healthcare in this city, and we've demonstrated it through the pandemic. We're demonstrating it through the work of the School of Tropical Medicine, the hospital, the Royal Hospital development, the Clatterbridge Cancer Centre, the Royal College of Physicians coming up in, setting up their headquarters outside London in Liverpool. We've got the Rutherford Cancer Centre. You've got the asset base of the University of Liverpool and John Moores University. This is an incredible collection of assets, not to mention Centre City and the Liverpool Science Park. It is incredible the amount of expertise that we have here on our doorstep in Liverpool. We have got to utilise that over the course of the next 5 years. We have got to inspire the next generation of medics and knowledge-intensive organisations, health-related professions, because we could not be in a better place to do that. And that really should be one of the key elements of our recovery plan. Similarly, the challenges that I talked about earlier, yes, they're challenges, they're systemic challenges. We've got problems with employment, we've got problems with health, but these are challenges to be overcome, and it's about overcoming them with collectively, public sector and private sector. And that is ultimately what will drive improvements in our economy and in the lives of us as citizens as well. So yes, we absolutely will survive, and it will be about that partnership working and that collective determination to get from where we are and taking it to where we want to be.
Listen, Paul, really inspirational stuff. A fascinating chat with you there. Thank you so much. Just tell us again where we can find out more info about the Chamber and how you can join the Chamber to get more support.
Thanks, Jay. So the Chamber website is www.liverpoolchamber.org.uk. We're on Twitter at Liverpool Chamber, and we're also on LinkedIn and Facebook. So you can find out all of the information that we're providing to businesses at this point in time, all the guidance we can provide, and also all the information around the services, events, and activities that we're delivering at the moment.
Brilliant. Paul Cherpeau, Liverpool Chamber of Commerce, thank you so much, and I will speak to you very soon. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks.